Back to help us work through the report from the GAO, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, my colleague from days gone by, Pete Hoekstra. Pete, we thank you for Skyping in again. Now that the GAO has found the Obama administration and the Pentagon violated the law, what's next?
Well, I'm not sure exactly where we go on this. This is an issue that back when the president first came into office, he started talking about closing Gitmo. And the question was, well, where are you going to bring the 170, 180 prisoners at Gitmo? And there was talk about bringing them to Illinois. There was talk about bringing them to my home state, Michigan. And that's when Congress got very much involved and started passing legislation that this is the legislation and the law that the president violated. And remember, these are laws that the president signed and decided not to veto, but putting very strict limitations on what the president could do with the detainees at Gitmo, that he couldn't move them to the United States, he couldn't spend money on moving them, and basically saying, when you're talking about Gitmo, you got to be dealing with Congress, and the president decided to ignore that with the Bergdahl swap.
Well, in terms of the aftermath of this Bergdahl swap and the report from the General Accountability Office, or the Government Accountability Office, the Obama administration and really the Justice Department is disagreeing, saying that determined before the transfer was implemented that this move would be legal. Is this just another example of Eric Holder basically becoming Mr. Obama's fixer, for lack of a better term?
Well, what it is, this all plays out of the president saying, I'm going to go it alone, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on taxes, whether it's on the environment and these types of things. And the problem is you've got a president who says, I'm going to go it alone, and then you've got a Congress that seems to say, okay, we're fine with that. This is an issue that Republicans and Democrats ought to be united on, standing up for the rights of the legislative branch. And when they put restrictions in, or when they create the law, the expectation is that the executive branch should follow the law. But I expect that when Congress comes back in September, the Democrats will defend the president. The Republicans in the House may pass some resolutions condemning this and talking about violating the law and the Anti-Deficiency Act. And the Anti-Deficiency Act, it's an old word, it's an old term, but it's very, very powerful. What it says is the executive branch has spent money that it has no authority to spend. That is a big deal. But Congress is not making it, and I don't think will make it a big deal. And the president will just kind of get a license to do more of what he wants to do over the last 2 years of his administration.
So the Government Accountability Office questions the accountability of this. Congress has the constitutional duty to hold the executive branch accountable, but in the final analysis, you don't believe that's going to happen in this pre-election reconvening of the Congress?
No, I don't think it will. The very interesting thing will be, this is one where now, if Congress isn't going to hold the president accountable, maybe the American people will hold the president accountable, and that will happen in November, the first Tuesday following the first Monday. It's called an election, where the American people say, we do have three branches of government. We need a stronger wall to hold this president back and to limit his executive actions in the last 2 years, the way Republicans take over the U.S. Senate.
Now, the GAO did not offer an opinion on whether this prisoner swap was necessary for purposes of our national security. But while the GAO has been silent, Pete, events earlier this week may have changed some perception, or may have reinforced some perception. I mean, you have the situation where, and on the screen now, the 5 hardened Taliban leaders given up in exchange for Bo Bergdahl. Then you had the beheading this week of James Foley. whether or not there's interaction between and among these Taliban officials and ISIS, certainly perceptionally the notion that, oh, we get this one guy back who's, well, speaking candidly, his allegiance is in question. His former squad members basically called him a deserter. All that surrounds this are the national security implications heading into the election for Mr. Obama and the Democrats as this prisoner swap comes back before the American people.
Well, remember, the Bergdahl swap came in the context of, we've eliminated the threat from Al-Qaeda. At that point in time, the president was describing ISIS as the JV team and basically claiming, we're out of Iraq, we're out of Afghanistan, the wars are over, the world is a safer place, it's time to end it, bring Bergdahl back. And what we have seen since then is, ISIS is not the JV team. Secretary Hagel yesterday called it, one of the greatest threats that America has faced in a significant period of time. This president has thoroughly mismanaged our foreign policy. America is now at greater risk. That's the debate, and that's the argument that's going to have to play out between now and November about how this president has mismanaged foreign policy, has put America at greater risk. The one question that I really have at this point, JD, is where are these Taliban 5 now? Are they still there? Who are they communicating with? Or have some of them actually left Qatar and maybe either gone back to Afghanistan, or are they in Iraq or Syria? I'm not quite sure, but I got to believe, and I'm suspicious that they're somewhat, they probably have their fingers in either Afghanistan or Iraq somewhat.
Well, and this becomes the question that I was going to ask next that you've identified here. Those 5 Taliban leaders were basically put, I guess, in house arrest in Qatar. But when you have an organization like ISIS that has regional, that really has global ambitions, we've seen some people described ISIS as rebranding of Al-Qaeda or an Al-Qaeda Junior. People talk about the Taliban, and while there may not be a monolithic movement, the fact is that region of the world is fairly geographically compact, so it is not out of the realm of possibilities that the Taliban 5 do have a role with ISIS, correct?
I think they have a lot more in common between these organizations than what separates them. Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, ISIS, the Islamic State that's being created or claimed to have been created in parts of Libya. They want to attack and destroy the West. They are radical jihadists. They have, they want to kill Christians. They want to kill Jews. They've got a lot more in common than what separates them. Does that mean they're going to do everything together? No. But at times, will they find ways to cooperate to get and achieve their larger objectives? Absolutely.
Before we finish our time together with the minute and a half that remains, let's go back to Bo Bergdahl. His legal counsel made the announcement earlier this week that Bo is ready to get on with his life, ready to leave the armed forces. But there has been the belief that he might face a court-martial, might face some sort of legal action under the Universal Code or the Uniform Code of Military Justice. In the minute that remains, what would you rate the chances to see Bo Bergdahl have to remain in the military, have to remain in the Army, and face legal action?
I think the possibility of that has to be very, very high. There are questions about what happened and the circumstances surrounding his, capture in Afghanistan. What happened? There are, discussions about, the folks that he served with in Afghanistan, that people that he served with were either injured or killed in searching for him. He needs to be held accountable. I think, regardless of what the administration may want to do, I can't believe that the senior management in the Pentagon would let this event go unchallenged.
And Pete, we will have to leave it right there. We thank you for your insights. And as always, for forecasting an in-depth analysis on ISIS, go to lignet.com. America's Forum continues.